Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Youth Evangelism School. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you guys to Frank. He's a detective with LAPD, and he's here to tell you about his life and just how he got to where he was and kind of what his work is like. So, everyone, please welcome Frank with a round of applause.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm glad to be here to speak with you. I'll give you a little background about myself. First of all, as Esther told you, I am a detective with the Los Angeles Police Department currently. I was born and raised in a little city here that you might have heard of recently called Monterey Park, where they did have a law enforcement incident of great measure and where they had an active shooter incident, but that's essentially my hometown. And I went to an average elementary school, Monterey Park Elementary. And from then on, I went to what you guys would consider to be junior high. We called it intermediate school. So I went to an intermediate school called Richard Garvey Intermediate, and that went from the 6th to the 8th grade. So at that time, I was more or less around your guys' age, and a little bit, going back a bit, regarding law enforcement. One of my earliest memories was when I was 5 years old, going to the police academy graduation of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, where my uncle graduated. So at 5 years old, I remember this memory. It was very vivid for me, beautiful. They actually had it downtown at the music center. And so my uncle, being a sheriff's deputy, sort of kind of got me thinking about wanting to be in law enforcement. But in all actuality, my mom was not overly excited about it because to her it was always a dangerous profession and something where you could get hurt or even worse. So anyway, going back to Richard Garvey Intermediate, I think I was like everybody else, sort of kind of unsure to a degree about how things were going, wanted to make friends, but also wanted to live within the confines of what my parents had set out for me. And I went there, and it was a little different than when I was in elementary school. Because elementary school, you go in there, and there are kids, and you go into your classroom, and you have one teacher, and that's your whole teacher for the whole day. So when you go and you have recess, you go back to that class, you go and have lunch, go back to that class, and by the end of the day, you get out of that class. Well, junior high school was a little bit more grown up. It was trying to prepare me, I guess, better for life in a sense, because at my junior high or intermediate school, Richard Garvey again, you would have different periods. So every class, you would have homeroom in the beginning, where they would get, I guess, the stuff they needed to get out of the way, let you know what was going on for the day. Then you would have your first, second, third period, what have you. And each period was topic specific in regard to like math, English, PE, whatnot. So that was good. But the thing about Richard Garvey is Richard Garvey was a much bigger school than my elementary school. So you not only had people from my elementary school, but you had like 4 different elementary schools all coming together. And that was a good experience for me, only in the sense that you got to meet people that were different from yourselves, okay? It began the process again of me having to meet people again, make new friends. Some of my old friends were there, and of course I had a ton of new friends that I had to make. But it also introduced me to one thing that I wasn't used to, I had never, ever run into before, and that was, there were some gangs at intermediate school now, because some of these other schools, I guess they had gangs. So I ran into an element of Hispanic gangs, and thinking back, my uncle being a police officer at the time, and my dad and my mom being very strong parents, and having an older sister to keep me aligned and a younger brother, it never really was an issue for me, but there was still some sense of maybe a little bit of fear of these things, not really going with that particular crowd and what they wanted to do, because you always got to think to yourself that you know what's right, you know what's good inside of you, and you want to do that. One of the things that I try to live my life with is being kind to people. And I think that's really important, especially in the end, if you decide to become a police officer, you got to be kind to people. And you guys see a lot of the news and stuff like that. They're chasing after people and, they're fighting people and just all kinds of things that are happening. But you don't really see a lot of the good side that occurs today. And I attribute that part to partially meeting all kinds of different people from different walks of life in junior high. So that was good. I went through that. It sort of made me grow up a little bit. They treated you more like an adult, not quite a full adult, but, you were responsible now for your homework and to get to that specific period. And, you needed to accept and take a little part of personal responsibility in your life at that point. Whereas before, my mom would take me to school, my mom would pick me up, we would be inside the classroom, the teacher would tell us when to go to recess, they'd be out there, come back from recess, go to lunch, and what have you. So we became a little bit more adults or at least on the path towards becoming an adult. It was a changing time because, again, like I said, you are exposed to a lot more in junior high than you were before. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You've got to make a decision and keep your own path and go the way that the way that your parents have taught you, and of course, the way that the church is an excellent, excellent model for how you should live your life. So anyway, from there I went to Alhambra to go to high school, Mark Keppel High School. Again, more schools came back. Now there were junior high schools, so even bigger. I think we graduated 600 seniors in my class when I graduated. But at this point, I was having the pull to want to be a police officer. I actually wanted to go into the United States military and then from that point become a police officer. And a lot of people nowadays, that may not be a career path that a lot of people want, but there are still people out here that would like to enjoy that type of thing. In those two professions, there's a lot of structure, and you've got to look at your career and what you want in regard to what you're going to be doing later on in life. Do you want something that's more free-flowing? Do you want something that's more structured? I know I was a person that worked well with structure, so it was good. So as I'm going through high school, I told my mom and my dad, hey, you know what? I want to join the Marines and go into the Marines, and then after that, I want to become a police officer, hopefully a Los Angeles police officer. And to that, my dad's like, oh, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And my mom turned around and told me, no. I'm like, what? No. Because my father was a Korean War veteran, combat veteran. My uncles were all Vietnam veterans. And so my family comes from being veterans in the military. That sort of influenced me to want to do it. And my mom, all she could hear was the danger and the terrible stuff and all this kind of stuff, right? So I told her, well, it gets a little bit worse than that, Mom, because after that, I want to get to the Los Angeles Police Department. And so she was not very happy about that. But okay, so I'm going through my high school years, freshman, sophomore, junior. Senior year comes around, and by the time I was going to graduate at my senior year, I was only going to be 17. And if I were to go on to college, I would still be 17 when I started college. So my senior year, it starts, we're in the fall, September, October, whatnot. I still have a little bit over a year before I'm going to become 18. So I'm really not able to make my own decisions in a sense. And, now looking back, it was sort of a good thing because I probably wasn't mature enough at that point. So, of course, I looked to my parents, I looked to my family structure, and I went and I saw a presentation. And at this presentation, there was Sergeant Alvarez. I mean, he was looking sharp in his Marine Corps uniform. He was wearing, blue pants with a red stripe, brown shirt. You had all the ribbons. Sergeant Alvarez, spit and polish. He was there. He was looking good. And after the presentation, I went up to him. Hey, Sergeant Alvarez, I'm Frank Alvarez. How are you? Oh, good. How are you doing? I'm like, great, man. I would love to join the Marines, sir. He's like, wow, that sounds great. I'm looking to recruit Marines and stuff like that. And he goes, when are you going to be 18? In a couple of months? No, sir. It's going to be over a year. He's like, well, you can't join the Marines until you're 18 without your parents' consent. And I thought back to the no. And I'm like, oh boy, there's going to be an issue here for me joining the Marines right out of high school. So he said, give me your name and give me your number and give me your mom's name and all that kind of stuff. And maybe I can talk to your mom. And so Sergeant Alvarez, I go home and a couple of days later, ring, ring, ring. This is when we had regular telephones, not like today where everybody's got a cell phone, right? And so I pick up the phone. Hello, this is Sergeant Alvarez. Oh, yes, sir, Sergeant Alvarez. Hey, is your mom home? Yes, sir, she's home, sir. Can I get her, sir? Yeah, go ahead. You don't have to call me sir all the time, okay? Okay, thank you, sir. So I went and I got my mom, and my mom was looking at me a little, confused, and she said, hello? Sergeant who? Marine Corps? Frank? No, thank you. Don't call here again. Slam. And she hung up on Sergeant Alvarez. And I was like, wow, that's sort of kind of crazy. Oh, my Lord. Who hangs up on a Marine Corps sergeant who was a drill sergeant? Those guys are tough. Those guys are tough. Well, I come to learn, those guys may be tough, but not as tough as Mama Bear, okay? Because Mama Bear's, the toughest one you got. So Sergeant Alvarez called about 4 more times, wanted to talk to my mom, and my mom wouldn't give in. She hung up. So I think Sergeant Alvarez gave up. And so I went through my senior year, and I thought, what do I want to do? Well, I want to become a cop, but my mom is dead set against that. And the Marines are totally out because right now she will not sign any form, and my dad's not going to sign behind her back because they are a unified team there. So I applied to Cal Poly Pomona, and I thought, maybe I'll do Cal Poly, and then I'll see where it goes from there. So I graduated, 17 years old. I started again at Cal Poly. I was 17, and after a couple of weeks at Cal Poly, I was like, wow, this is a little fun here. You meet a new group of people. Now they really treat you like an adult. You don't go to class, nobody's there like, hey, you didn't go to class. You just end up getting your F and have to repeat the class. Believe me, I won't tell you how I know that, okay? But that's what happens. So anyway, I went to Cal Poly and started loving it, loved Cal Poly, thought it was great, My parents were loving it. My, degree was finance, real estate, and law, and, it was going to be a business degree, and I go and I graduate from Cal Poly because I figure, hey, I'm already in this thing. I could join the Marines now once I turn 18, but let's see where this goes, and I like the business thing, and it was fun, so graduated from Cal Poly, did a couple of things, and got some jobs, and I ended up at a job for a little school here in Los Angeles called the University of Southern California. Anybody hear of that? A little school called USC. So anyway, I go to USC, I apply for a job as a financial assistant, and they loved my Cal Poly degree. I don't know why. They're like, wow, Cal Poly, that's a really good school. So they hired me, immediately, right on the spot. And they told me, okay, you'll be a financial assistant. You aren't going to work at the medical school here on Zonal across from County USC. You are going to be in the Department of Pathology, working finance there at the medical school. So I went there, and I became a financial assistant and did well. And then I ended up promoting up to financial manager. But all this time, I still had the pull of wanting to be a cop. I remember back in the day, my uncle there, his graduation. I remember all the family gatherings, the Christmases, Easters, July 4th, when we would talk about how proud we were of him. Everybody had a lot of pride. He had a lot of pride in himself. He looked sharp when he would go out there and represent the department, his department. And so when my uncle was getting ready to retire, I even went and, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I'll say I even went and he had me speak to the other deputies that were there and give a little speech in regard to him. So I was at his retirement and his graduation. But now to go back, graduate from Cal Poly, I'm working at SC, everything's going good, but I still don't feel like totally self-fulfilled. Great job. I have my own office, I have a couple of assistants. USC and a lot of people may not know this, is the largest private employer in the city of Los Angeles, okay? So, I mean, a lot of perks and all this kind of stuff, tuition remission. Actually took a couple of courses at SC before I left. And I still had the pull to want to be a police officer. But my mom, totally against it, okay? So I decided one day, let me go take the written test. They're having the test at Wilshire Station. I'll go there after work, take the test. Probably nothing's going to come of it. I'll take it just so I can tell myself I took the test. Go and I took the test. No big deal. It was an easy test for me because I had a degree. I was proficient in writing and, problem solving and all that kind of stuff. And we all shuffled out and stuff like that. Part of it at that time, and I don't know if it still is, was an essay. So I left. And about a month later, I got a letter back from the city of Los Angeles. You passed the written test. You are able to go on to the next step. Well, to become a police officer in the city of Los Angeles, there are a certain number of steps. Number one, you have to pass a written test. Then you go see a doctor, and he checks you out to make sure that your physical, he gives you a physical, make sure that you can see well, your hearing is good, you don't have any type of disabilities that would disqualify you. You go ahead and you do a physical agilities test where you run and you pull a dummy like out of harm's way and you jump over fences, do all this kind of stuff. Well, at that point, I was doing a lot of running. And some guys are not runners. Some guys are not athletes. Some guys like to run a little bit. I ran a bit because I sort of kind of enjoyed it. So I was running sometimes 10 miles a day, 4 days a week. So yeah, I was like running, I was what they call a running fool, right? And so I went and I took this test and I passed the test. I'm like, okay, that's great. Next test is, I passed the physical test. Well, there were 2 more tests that I needed to pass. And one of them was the background test, and the other one was the oral, where you actually go and you speak with 2 supervisorial, that's a hard word for me to say, police officers, like sergeants and lieutenants, and a civilian. So I go ahead and I go and take what's called my oral examination. There's a lieutenant there across the way from me, and boy, was I nervous. And a sergeant and a civilian. And they're asking you all kinds of questions. Why would you like to be a Los Angeles Police Department? What have you done to prepare for this? Just all types of big questions like that. So I did it, and I'm thinking, well, I think I sort of flubbed that a little bit. I was pretty nervous getting up there, talking to these people. These are important people, mind you. And, I'm Frank Alvale, just one guy sitting there. And about 3 weeks to a month later, I get my letter back. And not only had they given me 100%, which is the top that you can get, but they added a couple of extra points that they allowed because of my college degree. So my college degree was already paying off. I'm like, well. So they told me, okay, you've been scheduled now to go in for a background investigation. I'm like, oh boy, that one little test at Wilshire Station where I just thought I'd go and take it and get it out of the way, I'm at this point now. It's, months later now. I know that in the background investigation, they're going to go, hello, yes, is Mrs. Alvale home? We'd like to talk to her about her son. I'm like, she's going to find out now. Am I in trouble? Then I thought, well, there's a couple of things here. That's what I want to do, number one. And number two, if I can't stand up to my mom, I guess I shouldn't be a police officer, right? So I go and I talk to my mom and my dad. My dad was like, hey, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. My dad's, both my parents have always been very supportive to me, and all this was very good. But my mom, it took a little bit convincing, but once I convinced her, I told her, Mom, I've been dreaming of doing this for many, many years. It's what I want to do with my life, and I just feel I have to try this, give it a shot. Because if I don't, I'm always going to be asking, what if? So she said, you know what? I give you my blessing. Go ahead and proceed with it. I told her, I may not even make it. Who knows? And I'm thinking, well, I've never been arrested. I've gotten a ticket or two, and everything else is fine. So they went forward with my background check. Of course, talked with my parents. Knocked on all my neighbors' doors. Hey, is this guy a party animal? Have you guys ever called the police on him? What's going on here? Check me out thoroughly. Financially, they check you out. Is this guy a deadbeat? Does this guy not pay his bills, not pay his rent? What's going on with this guy? Checked with my friends, everybody. It's like they investigated me with the world, And that's after sitting me down for hours. And I don't want to call it an interrogation, but yeah, they interrogate you. So I ended up passing that. I got into Los Angeles Police Academy. And I just felt, wow, this is really meant to be. And I got to preface this, and I'll put this in this presentation because of my crowd. But it came after a lot of prayer, a lot of, soul searching and doing that. A lot of asking, like, should I do what I want to do, or should I conform to, what everybody else thinks I should be doing? I have a business degree. I easily can have my employment there, but I did what I wanted to do. So I went through the academy, and if you're not familiar with it, the Los Angeles Police Academy, everybody who is a Los Angeles police officer, except for the chief, has gone through that Los Angeles Police Academy. The chief, they can hire from another city. Willie Williams was hired from Chicago. Bill Bratton was the chief of New York and Boston. So the chief is the only guy that they can hire outside. Every one of your peers in that department has gone through the police academy with you. Every one of those people has run the same hills, done the same push-ups, sweat the same sweat, and bled the same blood in that academy when they put you through that, okay? So right away out of that academy, I earned about 10,000 brothers and sisters, which it's hard to explain that to you until you've gone through it. It's sort of like a military experience, but so 7 months in the academy, they teach you the law, so I can deal with Esther over here when we're filing cases together and going through the judicial system. They teach you about reasonable suspicion, probable cause, all this kind of stuff. And of course, you go and you do an infinite amount of running and push-ups and all that kind of stuff. And, they teach you how to shoot a gun and gun safety and, when you're allowed to use that type of force and when you're not. And after 7 months, you go ahead and you graduate from the police academy if you make it through. Then you go to a division. LAPD has 21 divisions right here. I've actually worked this division. This is the Olympic division. Very good division to work. Loved it over here. I worked it as a sergeant back in 2009 till about 2012. But you're a probationary officer for 1 year. And what that means is you're an at-will employee. So they can fire you for anything, basically. You better keep your nose clean, and you better not do stupid stuff because they're checking you off. You're working with somebody that has 2 stripes. They're called a police officer 3 or a training officer. So when you first get out of the academy, you're working with a training officer. First thing the training officer does before he even gets you in that police car is he talks to you or she talks to you, because we are looking for female police officers right now too, because we're understaffed in that regard. But they talk to you and they sit you down. And what are you going to do if my life is in jeopardy? What are you going to do if we have a guy with a gun? We're chasing a guy with a gun. They put you through all this stuff. They want to know if you have made the decision, have the correct mindset. And if not, they're going to set you straight. And then they take you out, and for a couple of months, they teach you how to do everything. Traffic stops, tactical situations, domestic violence calls. Some of it's just lost property, whatever, You get to do a couple of fun things, too, and they're fun until they turn bad, but, car chases and different kinds of stuff. So anyway, you do that, and after about 5 or 6 months, you're still a P1 probationary officer, and you've been signed off on everything. You get to work with usually your classmate or somebody that you request with, to work with. Because these are people that you've done a lot in the academy with. You know them. They become really close to you. So you work with them. And after about a year, you become a full-fledged police officer. Then once you're certified and do that, you can decide what you want to do. And I'm not going to go into everything. We have a ton of stuff to do. You can work auto table, robbery, major assault crimes, gangs, you name it. You can go to Metropolitan Division. You like horses? Go to the mounted unit. We got horses there. You get your own horse. That's all you basically do. Take care of that horse, ride that horse, do all that stuff. You like dogs? We have canines. You can have your own dog. They send you, for 2 weeks to Texas to learn how to work with this dog, and then they send you all over the place to learn about the dog, and you work with the dogs, and just all kinds of stuff. You want to fly a helicopter, we'll pay for you to become a pilot for a helicopter, if you want to do that. I mean, just a ton of different things that you can do in this department. Me, myself, I wanted to be an investigator, so I worked a domestic violence specialized unit car as a police officer. It gave me special investigative knowledge that I used. And then there was going to come a loan to homicide for a homicide detective. So I put in my paperwork, and they saw that I had already been to all these investigative schools. And as a regular police officer, which is rare in my department, they put me up in homicide as a homicide trainee. Because usually when you become a detective, you got to go through the different, what we call tables, the robbery table, the auto table, the burglary table, the major assault crimes table. But I got put straight up into homicide, which is like the golden ticket. So I worked for about 2 years as a homicide investigator because I was in a detective rank. And after about 1.5 years, I was actually training detectives to work homicide. So I took the detective's test, I passed that test, and I became a detective, and they put me again into homicide. So I worked 77th Street homicide, Southwest homicide, criminal gang homicide, and South Bureau homicide for my years as a homicide detective. And that was a blast, but that was work. That's a lot of work, and you got to decide, what do I want to do? How heavily involved in this do I want to be? So from there, I had already made sergeant too, so I went back to patrol for about 5 years to be a sergeant out in a patrol car in uniform in a black and white. And I did that, and that was fun. And then they offered me the position that I have now, which is Force Investigation Division. Now I roll out on any calls where a police officer has been involved in a deadly force incident. Usually we call them OISs, or officer-involved shootings. I don't know if you guys remember, about a month ago we had 3 officers shot in an incident. That was a call out that I would roll on. That's the type of call that I would handle in that regard. Now, I belong to what's called the Criminal Apprehension Team, which means I am the guy that goes after the guy that tried to kill the police officer. At that point, once we catch him and all that kind of stuff, I do all the paperwork, and then I go to Esther's company there, the company of the Los Angeles County District Attorney, and I present my case. Hey, this is all the evidence I got. I've spoken to these people, so on and so forth. This is our body-worn video. What do you think? Do we have it? Do we not have it? And then the DA will tell us, yeah, we're going to file these charges on this individual. If they don't think we have it, of course, it'll either send us out for further investigation, or they'll tell us straight out that we don't have it. But anyway, that's long and short what I do, how I came to be a police officer. And basically, there are 2 things that I want to leave you with today is, number 1, find something and follow your heart, because that's what you should do. And number 2, find something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's a saying that I've heard for many, many years, and it's true. On my days off, I'll tell you, I wanted to be at work when I was at home on my days off. So anyway, thank you for having me here. I appreciate you letting me speak to you today, and have a happy Easter tomorrow. God bless you. Thank you. Essentially, there is 2 types of homicides, and we investigate them both, actually. There's your regular murder, and then there's justifiable homicide, okay? So when somebody goes and kills somebody, we're the detectives that are sent to investigate that, who killed that person, collect all the evidence, and present it for prosecution to the DA's office. But it's probably one of the worst crimes that can be committed. Very serious. Justifiable homicide is if you're, say, for example, in a self-defense mode, and you had no option left but to defend your life, and the other person ended up dying, then you justifiably killed him. You know, the thing about it is, first of all, as a police officer, you don't want to ever have to use that type of force, but is it necessary? Yeah. But thank you for asking. Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the job and the hardest part?
My favorite part of the job, talking to people like you. I do get to meet a lot of people. I've worked different assignments. You know, we can work Dodger games where you meet, you know, the Dodgers. I've worked the Grammys. I've been there with Justin Bieber and Christina Aguilera and Stevie Wonder. And, you know, so we get access to a lot of different people. Now, that's not to say that the Biebs is going to invite me out to lunch, but, you know, we do get to see those people, and every once in a while, on occasion, if they're nice enough, you can go over there and ask them. You don't want to be pushy about it, and you got to know the surrounding circumstances, but to take a picture with them if at all possible. Yes, sir.
When you are out in the field,
Yes.
you find homicide place that involves a child. Not a child, someone who's under the age of 18,
Yes.
teenager, killing.
Yes. Well, number one, and like you said, it's usually a black and white that's going to be the first responder in regard to that. And the black and white will end up calling a supervisor who will end up calling out a homicide detective. Now, depending on what the age is of the individual, if it's a minor, we are going to call the juvenile abuse child unit detectives to come in, and they will assume investigative responsibility of that. If it's a teenager or somebody, I don't recall the exact age, but I believe it's around 14, then the homicide unit would handle under that age. Sometimes we have deaths that the child died in their crib, and we don't know if it's SIDS or if it's actual abuse. And so, you know, that's when we call in ACU, Abuse Child Unit, and they handle. And what I caution the black and whites and the uniformed officers to do is treat every death as a homicide in the beginning, and you can always pull that back. But if it's just a regular death, or you believe it to be, and it ends up being a homicide, you could have lost a lot of evidence. So thank you for the question. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much.
So much, Frank. We really appreciated your time and to come out here and speak with you, with us about your experience. Right now, we're going to have a 5-minute break. So take a 5-minute break, you guys, and then we're going to come back for Tim's message.